Hello, welcome to another SonicLAB. Today we're looking at the Moog Sub 37. This is the latest monophonic synthesizer from Moog, although it does play paraphonically with two voices, but more on that later. You notice I'm saying Moog and not Moog, it's just my British ways, so if you can get past that, then we can get on with the review. So here is the actual unit. It is a solid piece of kit. It's got the little fatty stage livery. This is a solid piece of cast aluminium. This is the tribute edition. We're still at the kind of limited edition, tribute edition. I know we first saw this at NAMM at the beginning of the year, feels like an awfully long time ago. We weren't sure when the tribute edition would end and when the kind of standard edition would come. For now, this is all that's coming out of the Asheville factory. Hopefully, the standard edition will be available, but the tribute edition has these lovely wooden end cheeks, and it's got the Bob Moog kind of signature tribute written on it. It's got a 3-octave keyboard with aftertouch, nice backlit buttons. We've got solid knobs, not wobbly. It's essentially a knob per function, pretty much. And that was one of the criticisms I had of the Sub Fatty, which was kind of the predecessor of this, was the fact that there was basically not knob per function. There were lots of things hidden. If you remember, there was that matrix. You can see the review elsewhere. I'll put a link in the show notes and you can check that out. While it sounded good, there were certain times when you changed programs, you just thought, where am I? I don't really know. Not so with the Sub 37. Pretty much everything is on the front panel. There are some aspects that you get to via the programming LCD and section over here. Mostly this is to do with modulating routings and kind of global functions, although there are a few extra parameters in there. So let's take a listen to some oscillators and get started. So first of all, I'm going to go into bank 15 because these are knit patches, and that's one thing we've got across the bottom here. We've got 16 buttons, so we've got 16 banks of 16 presets, so a lot more memories to play with. So now let's just listen to a straight wave. This is a saw wave. We can get higher frequency by using the octave shift, and additionally lower frequency right down into the low frequency mode. So let's just take this through the waves. Triangle, saw, square, pulse. This is modulatable. Sounds lovely, actually. And if we now come and bring a second oscillator into play, make them both saw, we can tune that up to +7 semitones, or just have it down as a slight detune. You can hear the beat frequency here. And that's the cool thing. Now I get to show you the beat frequency in operation. So if I now tune that back, I can add the beat frequency, get it beating how I want. But as I play the keyboard, the beat frequency remains constant. So it's another neat little feature that just adds a certain something and allows you to do something slightly differently. So another thing, if I take them to two squares and I play my bass sound, I'm triggering here, you can hear that it's a slightly different front end each time. It's all sort of wandering about a bit, and that's because every time you hit, you can't always be sure that the waveform is going to be starting at the same place in the cycle. And that's one thing that's really neat, because now I can introduce keyboard reset, which is this button here, which now means every time I press that key, it starts at the same point at the beginning of the waveform, so you get a very consistent front end. Obviously you can sync the waveforms, get that classic sync sweep. The only thing you can't do is modulate other things with the oscillator. You can't use the oscillators as modulator sources or cross-modulate, which is something that some people are going to want. Mixer is next, and one thing that's really cool about these is the ability to switch on and off waves with these buttons here. We've got a sub wave, which is a octave down, square wave only. So let's bring our wave back. We'll take them both to be, let's have them both as triangle waves now. And one thing that you can really hear here is the effect of the drive on the signal. So now if I turn past 12 o'clock, I'm taking it up here and I do the same, it really kind of adds a whole bunch of extra drive and harmonics into the filter, and we haven't even tackled the filter yet. So now you can really notice this if I tune it up, you can hear there's a lot of drive going on there. If I bring the lower key, you can really hear how much extra drive is brought in via the mixer. If I want even more drive, just take these two sawtooth a second. I can engage the multi-drive circuit, dial this in, gives me even more drive, which drives the OTA and FET stages post-filter. It's a dedicated distortion drive. Or if I want even more drive, I can come to the feedback external input. Now what this is obviously the external input. If we plug something into it, then it'll process via the mixer and then via the filter for processing external signals. But if we've got nothing plugged in, then what happens is this effectively takes the output and routes it back into the input to give you even more drive. So loads more distortion and drive there should you need it. So obviously the filter's the next major port of call, and in many ways this is as one would expect, but it's got a few twists. Let's just listen to 12 o'clock drive. That nice brassy Moog sound, but we can accentuate that even more by taking the drive up. Let's take it up to full. Here it starts to get that kind of characteristic Moog ladder filter driven sound, the sort of thing that we would ordinarily expect from, say, a Mini. It's just there, but we can actually accentuate it or de-accentuate it. Main thing is the fact that we've got a multi-mode filter here. But let's just try, we'll just bring a bit of, take it back to 12 o'clock, add some resonance. Yeah, you can play the filter and it is fully self-resonant. But back to the slope, if I take the resonance down and we come back up to oscillator 1. Now we're in 24 dB mode, and this we can switch between 6 dB, 12, 18 and 24. The 6 dB one is actually quite interesting. Listen to the 24, listen to the 6. Particularly when you bring the resonance in. Drive it a bit harder. Go to 12. 18 and 24. And then when we add the multi-drive, in 6 dB mode. You get this almost sort of band pass kind of effect, and that's the thing I really like. I can't think of many other synthesizers that have a 6 dB slope apart from obviously the sub-fatty, and the 6 dB slope really does kind of make it into almost a completely different filter, and it's like having multi-mode but a sort of different twist on it. I mean, some people might prefer to have a full multi-mode filter, but I actually quite like this. This has a very different sort of characteristic to it. Let's take a quick break and have a look at some more physical aspects. We've got these lovely mod and pitch wheels, nicely backlit in tasteful orange. All connections are happening in this panel here. We've got USB MIDI, MIDI in and MIDI out. Then we've got control voltage inputs for pitch CV, volume CV, filter CV, keyboard gate, and finally a single output and a single input and a IEC connection plus mains switch. Another neat function is the ability to mute the main output while still having access to this dedicated headphone output with its own volume control. Until recently, envelopes have been kind of fairly dull and lifeless things, but in the Sub 37 they're really brought to life. We've got two of them here, ADSR type, filter and amplitude. Not only have we got a tactic decay sustain release, but we've also, via this other function knob button, we can dial in delay and hold. So we've got additional stages to the envelope, and that is independently for each of them. There's also velocity amount and keyboard tracking, which is quite useful. The other thing about them is they're really nicely scaled. So if I just play the sound here, take the attack off, and now bring the decay down, you get a real snap to them as well. And one thing I did find is, you know, you can get some really nice, kind of really snappy, if I think I've got a patch here. Really kind of snappy envelopes that smack, and that's actually uncommonly quick, so you can get a really nice sort of punch and poke out of them. There's also additional features such as looping, which really kind of opens up them as well. So again, with this sound, if I hit loop, how quickly we can get them into audio rates, and we effectively have another LFO here, and this works for both envelopes independently. There's a few other modes beside. If I switch latch on my amplitude envelope, I'm essentially a hold button, but then I can also put loop in and have it looping at a specific rate, and maybe do the same for the filter envelope. So I can create some quite complex polyrhythm stuff. Additionally, we've got a sync button on each one, which triggers the envelope in time with the arpeggiator, and a reset button. Now, with all of this kind of latching and looping and all of these kind of facilities, it's entirely possible to create a patch where the synthesizer just goes crazy and is off doing its own thing. In fact, I've got a patch here where I recall I've got looping and latching all sorted out. I'm just going to recall that, and it'll just start playing. And for it to stop, I'm going to have to switch things off and start kind of getting jiggy with it, and that's really good. I mean, in many ways, you know, obviously if you don't know what you're doing, you could get into terrible trouble, but I quite like the fact that this synthesizer can get out of control, which for a sort of front panel keyboard based synthesizer is quite a rarity actually, and it's a testament to the depth and the amount of routing and the possibilities that you get in what is essentially quite a small package. But things now get so much more complex in the introduction of the mod section. So we've got two LFOs, both pretty much identical. We're going to concentrate on just LFO2 here. The rates go really low, right up into, I dial into filter, audio rates, and then if we introduce the high range, it takes it even higher. Dial in filter amount, positively and negative, also pitch. We can do that for oscillator 1, oscillator 2, or both together. Both have positive and negative settings and a nice center dent in the middle. Other functions are, we can sync it to the incoming clock or the arpeggiator tempo, and there's a keyboard reset, which as you can hear just resets the waveform every time there's a key down, which is useful for kind of tempo sync stuff. Waves are triangle, square, down ramp, up ramp, random, and this setting here, which is FNEG or program. I don't know if you can see that, it's quite small, and this allows you to use the filter envelope as a modulation source, dialing it in. You have to give up the kind of LFO, but it means that you can do some clever things. Back to the settings here, we've also got this mod matrix, which allows us to send various destinations, so oscillator 1 wave, oscillator 2 wave, both together. I was just using one for pulse width there. Noise level, envelope time on program, which is kind of cool. You can modulate the envelope time, which means if you've got a loop going, you could have it sort of going, triggering at a speed and then accelerating and decelerating based on the LFO2 rate, which is kind of neat. LFO1 rate, so we can modulate the speed of LFO1 with LFO2 and vice versa, LFO2 with LFO1, VCA level. If I come to LFO1 now, dial in a bit of filter amount. If I flip this round to the FEG/program, it means that I can use the filter envelope as a modulation source. So coming back here, so now say let's dial pitch in. I'm using the filter envelope to modulate. You can see it's triggering on key press, and this is the amount. Additionally, if I want to, I could add maybe this mod 1 bus as well, which I've got sent to noise level. So I'm able to route this into a couple of destinations. So if I now want to access even more destinations and sources, I press to EG time program here. And that brings in the programming side of things, which is on this end here. So this is where we get involved in a little bit of cursor and programming. So pressing the controller button brings up this menu here, and we have the program source, which is filter envelope. And then we've got program destination, and this is where it gets really interesting. There are a whole ton of destinations, really, really granular. I'll throw up a little graphic here and you can see exactly where you can send it. You can also set the mod wheel depth, whether you route it via velocity, aftertouch, controller 4, MIDI controller 4, and these you can edit mod 1 and mod 2. And all of these are stored on a per patch basis, so you can set up very complicated routings, save it with your patch, and you're good to go. One thing that I say is missing in the LFOs is the ability to fade in the modulation depth. Some LFOs and other synthesizers have a delay setting. Arpeggiator is well worth looking at as well. Goes from 2 BPM up to 280 BPM, got a tap tempo, can be externally synchronized to the incoming MIDI clock. We've got a range of +3 to -3, 6 octave range. I've also got the ability to make it go backwards and forwards and invert the pattern as well. Additionally, this makes up for the fact that there's less patterns on the selector. And then we've got the sequencer mode, which is a sequencer playback and record mode. This is pretty cool. It gives up to 64 steps. Each pattern is saved with the patch, and you can use it in duo mode or in mono mode. So duo mode is when we can play up to 2 notes. It will record 2-note events on a single step. So all I've got to do to record is flip that into record mode. I can enter ties and rests by pressing these buttons here, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm just going to play a really simple pattern. So I'll flip that into record mode, into play mode, press my play. So now I'm just going to press on and latch and hit go. Trance Heaven. Glide mode is also pretty comprehensive on the Sub 37. Not only can we send it to either one or both of the oscillators, we've got all sorts of modes that we can work with. LCR is the glide rate will depend upon the interval between the 2 notes. LCT, the glide rate will stay the same between notes regardless of the interval. And exponential, the slide rate starts slow and speeds up as it reaches the note. They've also got the ability to work in gated mode. I mean, these are all pretty kind of subtle differentiations between the different glides. But if you're a kind of experienced monosynth player, then these are the things that can make a difference between how you kind of articulate your solos and how it plays. And it's nice to see that they've given it some special attention. I'm well aware that this review is getting actually quite long now, and I haven't been spending a lot of time just playing the synthesizer, and that's just purely because there is so much to this synth. Moog have really pulled out all the stops, I think, here, and this is a really kind of fully featured synthesizer with a lot of very deep capabilities. They've really sort of taken where the sub-fatty left off, and the gap between that and the fully blown Voyager and Voyager XLs, this kind of sits somewhere in the middle. And in fact, you're getting a heck of a lot of synthesizer for the money, in my opinion. I mean, I know the Tribute Edition works out at around about 1,100–1,200 quid, which I think is actually a pretty fair price for the amount of synth you're getting here. I mean, obviously, if they ever get round to making the standard edition, that could well be even cheaper. And I know, generally speaking, Moog is a premium brand, but I feel here we're really getting value for money for them because it's a quality build, quality synthesis. You know, these people really know about synthesis, and they've applied all of their boffins kind of know-how into making this all it can be. And I, for one, am actually really impressed. And I think, as a, you know, if you want a really sort of fully featured synthesizer, monophonic synth, then this is a pretty good place to start.